So with this character issues, we're going to talk about Ben Reilly, the Scarlet Spider, or Chasm. We're going to talk about the Clone Saga. And this is probably one of Marvel's most reviled storylines. What I fear with Age of Revelation, where it's going to overstay its welcome in this massive way, kind of like how Sins of Sinister just, it was good, but then it just went on for it went past the point of being good to where it's an endurance match and you just stopped caring about it. Imagine that for years. I think the Clone Saga, if I'm not mistaken, the original Clone Saga was in 1975 and there was 3 issues and done. But the 90s Clone Saga did not end. And it broke a lot of really avid Spider-Man readers because it just wouldn't stop. It was too much. It lasted 2 years and ended up getting to the point where Spider-Man fans were begging for the Clone Saga to end. It was just the saga itself. And so we're going to talk about my boy Ben Reilly. Here's the thing about Ben Reilly. Ben Reilly, outside of Miles Morales, had that shit on. Like, he was the best designed Spider-Man. His costumes always are incredible. And I'm not saying that just out the blue. Ben Reilly, the better dressed Spider-Man. When Miles came along, Miles kind of elevated and gave it a little bit of flavor. But up until that point, Ben Reilly's suits were way better than Peter's. But I have yet to see anything that beats some of the stuff that Ben Reilly's putting on. He was kind of my favorite design of the character of Spider-Man. Who is Ben Reilly, really? He is the clone that was not supposed to exist. In the 90s, they were going to retire or sunset Peter Parker, or at least put him out to pasture for a while. And that's when they introduced Ben. And there was all this, who done it and all this other stuff around who's the real Spider-Man and who's the clone. I try to remember the mechanism by which they determined initially that Ben was the original Spider-Man, original Peter Parker, and Peter was the clone. And then they flipped it. He was a clone that wasn't supposed to exist. He earned being Spider-Man twice. He had to build a personality for himself with memories that weren't really his. This Spider-Man should have been a parallel evolution, not just a spare part. I feel like Ben is probably one of the most misused main characters in the Spider-Man universe. A lot of people did not like the Clone Saga. And it wasn't the fact they didn't like it. It just went on too long. It would not stop. And I don't think y'all understand when I say it would not stop. When X-Men were in the age of Krakoa, it was long, but at least the stories were engaging and they moved the story forward. I'll probably do a breakdown of the Clone Saga. The problem with the Clone Saga is it ran too long, contradicted itself multiple times, and they never ironed it out. When the fans were sick of it, they just pulled the plug. And it left everybody completely unsatisfied with the ending. I think Ben Reilly is the perfect autistic-coded Spider-Man. There's a lot of legroom for that character in the way we discuss neurodivergence. This autistic Spider-Man fits perfectly in universe. And Marvel really refuses to fully commit to that version, but it exists in the way that he's been presented and written. He would be a good representative and a good juxtaposition where he's not just a duplication of Spider-Man. The costume was fire. But the way they got Chasm out here, it feels like they just had to have something to do with Limbo. They are just playing with Ben Reilly at this point. And I feel like they're wasting the potential momentum of this character. This representation of Ben Reilly, Scarlet Spider, the clone Spider-Man is good. This is trash. And this is what Marvel currently has him at. I don't like this. This is trash. I feel like Chasm there as a placeholder because they don't have anything for him. I'm going to talk about that, what my possible solution to have Peter Parker and Ben Reilly coexist without him being a weird, ambiguous villain with green blasty powers, because that seems to be the default. Like, when you don't have any idea for what to do with the hero, you just make him into a dark version of himself who has green blasty powers or blue blasty powers. And the blasty powers are going to be color coded, green or blue. I think we have to do something better with him. We need to do right by him because there's so much there with the character. There's all kinds of stories that we can write. The way Ben Reilly was conceived, he has to cobble together a personality, cobble together memories. He's not a one-for-one duplicate of Peter Parker. He is physically with his powers and everything, but from his mind, he has to put together who he is. He doesn't understand a lot of nuance. He doesn't read between the lines. He can be funny, but he's more blunt, more direct. So we're going to get into a little bit of the publication history. Of course, 1975, the original Clone Saga introduced Peter's clone, created by the Jackal, which is another one of those seemingly throwaway Spider-Man villains who really shouldn't be thrown away. They've made him the centerpiece of the story, but keep putting him out to pasture every couple of years. Every time they bring him back, it's confusing and you don't really engage with it. The clone pretty much dies immediately in the comic. Like, just 1975 Clone Saga, we're going to leave this at a couple of issues and we're done. Okay. Then for some reason, Marvel was scraping for stories, and in 1994, they brought this back. Ben returns. He's older and wandering. And for a moment, Marvel actually let him be the mainline Spider-Man. There was fan outrage, but there was something going on in the 90s where there was this fever that gripped the comic book industry. We killed Superman, we broke Batman's back, and we Peter Parker for a while. Superman did come back. Batman comes back after the entire John Paul Valley Azazel thing. I still don't know what they really did with John Paul Valley. I think they killed him and brought him back. DC collectively pretends that he doesn't exist. Spider-Man with Ben Reilly and Kane was the other clone. Ben returns older. He doesn't really have an identity. He has to cobble together one. And they let him be Spider-Man. And so Ben Reilly Spider-Man era starts in 96. The sensational Spider-Man #0. He has a brand new suit, brand new start. For a brief run, he is Spider-Man. He's a little bit different. He's written a little bit different than Peter. I kind of enjoyed having a different vantage point of that character. But he did do it. And then Marvel doing the Marvel thing. Since trauma has to happen to Peter, his brother is going to die in his arms. And the body degrades, and then it reveals that he was the clone. The trauma shapes everything thereafter, at least for a little bit. They've brought Ben back and killed him plenty of times. They've kind of used trauma to shape him into this morally fractured kind of character. They don't really have to do that. If you're a clone and you're born with the template of a memory of somebody that already exists, you are already fucked up. So we don't need to inflict more mental trauma on you to make you an interesting character. You're an interesting character in and of itself. The Vegas era, the Ben Reilly Scarlet Spider, that was 2017. I messed with that book. The book was kind of dope. It's the first time Marvel allowed him to establish himself as a standalone character in the Spider-Man universe. So that was Peter David, one of the GOATs. Peter David wrote one of my favorite versions of the Hulk, and he kind of understands characters in a way where there's some nuance and some layer to it, especially when it's psychologically complex characters. Peter David had a knack for writing them and making them interesting without making them feel like cliches. I've been a mark for Ben Reilly for a long time, but I think the most recent bringing him back and kind of gave him his own city to do his own thing. And you would see like he would cross over with Kane and stuff. I like that side of it. Okay. But yeah, they gave him space to grow. And then since good things can't last, and I cannot have a comic book that I enjoy for a certain number of years, we're going to do the dark web thing. I need somebody to explain to me what dark web was. It gave us Chasm. And I know it was Ben Reilly and Madeline Pryor, and it was kind of a crossover with what was going on in the X books, but not really. It was terrible. I felt like it was kind of betrayal. So he lost his memories. He snaps. He becomes a villain. He's infused with limbo powers somehow. And this is just Marvel saying, we don't know what to do with him. And Marvel does that in the Spider-Man universe a lot. Like they'll introduce another potential member of the Spider-Man family and then just kind of forget about him. And I think that's kind of what happened with Ben. I think he fell victim to Marvel's editorial. We don't have anything for him. He's a known character, but we're just going to make him a random villain that's tied in with one of our flagship books. That's where I'm at with Ben Reilly. And I feel like Marvel is a betrayal of the character moving forward because I think he's a fantastic. We just need to build around him. Like I said, we have this autistic coded Spider-Man who can represent characters on the spectrum and show that neurodivergent aren't like Rain Man stereotypes. We can have depth layers, relationships, and be quippy and funny. Our brain just functions a little differently, and I fuck with that. So let's get into what his physical powers are. He has the entire Spider-Man package: strength, agility, reflexes, stamina, above average durability, spider sense, wall crawling, superhuman recovery. He's durable but not quite bulletproof. But he also has a small healing factor, superhuman speed relative to his physiology and stuff. Some things that made him unique is the way that he applied his tech. This is where we first saw the impact webbing, which was a good use of it. Web stingers. The design was dope, where he had the web shooters on the outside of his costume. His costume made sense. Like, he has a hoodie on. He's outside swinging around on rooftops. It's cold up there, so he has a hoodie on. Because Marvel can't fix things until they're broken, now we have Chasm's powers. I need to pull up what Chasm's powers are, so I am not doing an injustice to this character. I checked out so hard on Chasm that I didn't even follow up. I had to do a lot of catching up on what they've been doing with him. As soon as I saw it and saw that they're like, oh, we're making him a random Spider-Man villain who's angsty and mad at Peter, I checked out. If they don't care, why should I care? Truly, if they don't care, why should I care? I'm in the wiki, and typically I don't always go to the Marvel wiki because it's not always 100% accurate. Okay, let's pull it up here. Immune to spiders, Peter-Man, Spider-Man sense, web sense. Where is wall crawling? Psycho-radioactive goo. So he can make light weapons. While psionic webbing could be an interesting power set for a Spider-Man character, psychoactive goo sucks. The wiki just kind of gave up. It said he was exposed to psychoactive goo. He learned new abilities such as forging solid light weapons and emanating his own energy during his fight with Peter. They gave him green blasty powers. If we're gonna make this guy a villain, give him green blasty powers. Because what else are you gonna do? We're gonna make him an evil Green Lantern analog who's Spider-Man. Oh my God. Ugh. I think Ben works best when he's grounded, where he's not mystical, magical, none of this demonic BS, and not necessarily adjacent with the X-Men books. I feel like you can fold him in, kind of like how Peter is welcomed into the fold. His entire existence is imposter syndrome, like a physical embodiment of imposter syndrome. He's born without an identity, and he has big shoes to fit because of Peter. Ben Reilly has to fit. And he doesn't quite have a frame of reference. Like, he didn't experience a childhood. He didn't experience a lot of the regular developmental milestones. The way his mind works, he is a super literal thinker. He's just as intelligent, but easier to manipulate than Peter. He never really learned social nuances. He had to build a personality from scratch. His relationship to humanity isn't forged by his upbringing. It's forged by his like car crashes into interacting with regular humans. It's not hard to do. All you gotta do is plant your flag down and say, this is what we're gonna do with the character. The abridged childhood equals literal processing. He isn't really able to pick up on it. I struggle when somebody is being sarcastic. I have to hold myself and think for a second. Are they really being literal? Do they really mean that? Sometimes it takes a lot longer. He learned language cognitively, not socially. He didn't really have a childhood. Sarcasm doesn't necessarily land the same with him. He processes metaphors literally. There's a layer of cold logic that locks into this character. And you can see it the way that he interacts and the way that he makes determinations and judgments in the field. He has a very dry, deadpan sense of humor, where it's different than Peter's, where it's meant to get a laugh every once in a while from the audience. Peter's witty because he's always improvising and he's trying to mask the fact that he's terrified. Ben's witty because he is saying exactly what's coming and what exactly was crossing his mind, and some of the absurdities of what he's engaging with when fighting supervillains. Imagine if you are a neurodivergent person who is a superhero who's fighting supervillains, and some of the absurd shit that actually happens Ben's kind of reacting to. This is representation without leading into tropes. It would be dope, Marvel, if you hired a neurodivergent writer or creator to write Ben Reilly so we can get him right. Because you have him coded the right way. That's maybe one of the reasons why I resonate with him so much as a character. Because he's awkward. And it's not nerd awkward, it's awkward. I don't understand how you humans interact with one another kind of awkward that I experience sometimes. Trauma, identity dysphoria, neurodivergent emotional wiring. The repeated deaths during the Clone Saga, like you're telling me that that didn't impact him in a way that changes his developmental milestones? It breaks his brain, and it's not in a villain way. That's what it would do to you. Like if you're Ben, his executive function is slapped together, and it makes it even more amazing that he's able to go out and save people. Okay. Let's talk about it. Some of this stuff is in the narrative. Some of this stuff is just stuff that I've extrapolated from reading the books. When I do character issues, I look at it from my goal. I've always wanted to write for Marvel. I know it's not the best pay, and you got to deal with some stuff that goes along with it. That was always my dream life. I would look at the characters and what nuances I would add. And I try to be very careful about not dogging out specific writers because I know everybody's creative process is different. And I know in the grand scheme of things, they've achieved something that I have not, which is writing for a major comic book company. But when I do these, I always try to, how would I make the character better? So for me, Ben is the meticulous planning Spider-Man, the one who breaks all the problems into pieces, where his Peter is kind of like this reactive genius, where his genius manifests spontaneously. I would like Ben Reilly's to be a little bit more planned. He does need rules, like he has to have written rules for himself, and he needs job parameters where he obsesses about missions, because Peter does obsess about missions too. That's why Peter's life in the comic books is constantly kind of a wreck, because the missions take over. But I'm talking about all the other stuff that goes along with the mission, not just the action. Ben will go MIA for days while he's following a case, not just because he's fighting the villain, but because he's actually figuring things out. The Spider-Man that's blunt and doesn't like ambiguity, I like that. Autistic-coded, elegant, respectful, is visible in how he's been written. This is how Marvel keeps misusing my boy. They treat him as disposable. This Chasm thing, ugh. They keep treating him as this disposable character that we can yank in and out of stories. They treat him as a walking plot twist. When do we need to turn things askew? Let's just throw Ben in the mix. They turn a villain or insidious every single time they can't figure out what to do with him. And it's corruption instead of character development. This Chasm thing is a shining example of it. He's corrupted now. I don't know why. They keep shoving him back into Peter's shadow instead of giving him a home. I think that we need to establish him outside. The Vegas run was perfect. They don't want to stabilize him. They don't want to give him his own thing. So this is how we fix Ben. This is how we fix Ben Reilly, in my mind. I say we get him out of New York, because we got Spider-Man, who's kind of Spider-Man of Queens. We got Peter, Peter's the Spider-Man of Queens. Miles, who's the Spider-Man of Brooklyn. I almost feel like we need to move him out of Spider-Man, out of Peter's ecosystem, and kind of leave their crossovers for when like Ben's in town or something. But I say if we're doing Vegas, we can do Vegas. I say we can make him the Los Angeles Spider-Man. Marvel hasn't really messed with Los Angeles a whole lot. West Coast Spider-Man. And he has to establish himself and deal with all the other sides of Hollywood and the glitz and glamour and all the other stuff that comes with being a superhero in LA next to the entertainment industry. There's a lot of stories we can tell there. Not New York. Get him out of New York. Because when he goes to New York, they end up overshadowing him. Other cities work because there's different cultural rhythms. There's space for new rogues, and new rogues for Ben don't have to be one-for-one translations where he has his own Dr. Octopus, but you can make a character that's kind of like his Dr. Octopus or his Vulture. You could do what you've been doing in the Miles Morales Spider-Man, where you give him unique rogues that will cross over occasionally. Give him new community ties and a new kind of his own supporting cast that actually is consistent, where they just don't can disappear for no reason. Giving him his own city dictate what kind of Spider-Man he's going to be. And I know he's not going to be Spider-Man. He's probably going to be Scarlet Spider somewhere else. We can give him something else and allow him to grow into his own Spider-Man, where he comes up with his own way that he fights crime based on his neurodivergence. 100% buy that book. Build a rogues gallery around his challenges, not Peter's villains, bro, but villains themed around distortion and miscommunication and gaslighting and identity theft. Mysterio's kind of distortion. He's also kind of gaslighting. Chameleon could be identity theft. Then ambiguity as a weapon, sensory overload, villains who exploit literal thinkers, where you have con men, where he has to deal with his own iteration. Maybe you could even make him fight the purple. It's the perfect foil for this type of enemy because they keep him grounded and aged up, where he doesn't revert to being a child. That's one of the things that we keep running into with Spider-Man books, where the writers have to constantly show us that Peter Parker is this hyper-responsible, irresponsible man who never grows up. If you're not following the current Spider-Man, he's in outer space. He just got finished with a couple of missions for Rocket Raccoon, and he has his own crew of outcasts that he's leading in space missions. Not Adam Warlock, but Warlock from Doug, that X-Men Warlock. And so he has one of those. It's a suit that has its own sentience. It's a biomechanical suit. And it called him out for a lot of his piss poor thinking, which was dope. I was shocked. But anyway, back to Ben. He gives him a different perspective. He's not jokey like Peter, but he has a really dry sense of humor, where the jokes only got to be funny to him. He's not grim, but he's dry, literal, quietly funny. And he's way too blunt and way too honest. And let the Chasm shit go. My God, let it go. If we have to have an exorcist, if we have to have Brother Voodoo or Doctor Strange or Clea show up and do an exorcism on Chasm, and it's revealed that one of Madeline Pryor's demons took over Chasm's body, get rid of this Chasm thing completely and totally. Do not do this Chasm thing. He isn't a villain. He isn't corrupted. He's not man. He's trying to build his identity, and he doesn't have the same kind of. He experiences the world differently, and so it makes it harder for him, especially since he doesn't have the formative years to learn how people interact socially. Reframe him as the neurodivergent Spider-Man, the autistic AU coded Spider-Man, and he's not quirky. Hero that processes the world a little bit differently, who has the internal monologue that shows with human interaction. He interprets communication differently. Maybe you could even give him a quirk. One of my quirks is I tend to interrupt people, and I'm not being disrespectful. That's just how my mind fires off ideas, and I can't always shut it down. Sometimes I'm not even aware that I'm talking. He fights differently, where it's not the damn near going to kill you kind of fighting that Kane does, but he is a little bit less protective of his rogues and his villains. And he solves problems differently. This presents a neurotype that a lot of people can identify with. And I think you would find a new audience for Ben. That's a Spider-Man. Marvel's done a lot of weird bullshit to try to say we're making Peter Parker relatable. And they've done everything except make him a relatable character. I think they have a chance to get it right with Ben. They've got it right with Miles. Miles is kind of a relatable Spider-Man. I think what Marvel keeps fumbling with is the way that they've done Peter Parker editorially, where he's not allowed to be married because some editor somewhere thought that him being married aged him up too fast, and we can't tell interesting stories with him and Mary Jane. It was a short-sighted thing. Making him this eternal bachelor / man-child without an anchor like Mary Jane Watson, to me, that makes him unrelatable. Spider-Man found his actual one, and they keep removing her from his universe. If you're Peter Parker, as an adult, you need people that stick by you thick and thin and understand your flakiness. And they had it with Mary Jane, but for whatever reason, Marvel's editorial team will not let them be married. They think that that makes him relatable, and it really doesn't. You have a super genius who didn't have the resources like Tony Stark or Reed Richards and stuff, or even a Victor Von Doom. You have a super genius who hobnobs with the richest and most powerful people on the planet. He hasn't said, hey, can you help me develop a patent or something so I can finance this stuff so I'm not struggling to make my rent? Hey, Tony, Professor X, you guys are independently wealthy. Write me a grant or something so that I could keep Norman Osborn from conquering the U.S. again. Because last time we took the eye off the ball with Norman Osborn, he essentially conquered the entire U.S. and took over S.H.I.E.L.D. And so I'm the one who normally keeps him in check and prevents that. You guys just can't handle it. We're telling me that Peter can't do that. And so I think in Marvel's attempt to make him relatable, they made him unrelatable. And so you have a chance with Ben Reilly to make an actual relatable version of Spider-Man in the same vein that Miles Morales is a relatable version, and not force it. So that's what I got on that end. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I love the character, and I think we could really do something with Ben Reilly. Maybe I could do another character issues on Kane. I like the clones and the fact that they are basically Peter Parker with different personalities. Kane being the bloodlusted, I don't give a fuck kind of Spider-Man was dope, where we have this unhinged kind of Spider-Man. If we're being real, the way that I could see Kane as Spider-Man is how they had Miguel O'Hara in the Spider-Verse movies. That's how I see the ruthless, by any means necessary kind of Spider-Man. I'll do one on Kane. But I think that Ben Reilly is your perfect autistic coded Spider-Man. This is how they presented his character. Why not lean all the way into it and give people a comic book character they can relate to, as opposed to stereotypes of neurodivergent people that propagate our media, where there's so many neurodivergent people in creative roles in this country. The accepted way that we present people that have ADHD or people that are autistic and stuff like that, the way that we present them is just basic stereotypes as opposed to nuanced characters with depth. I think Ben Reilly's your perfect guy to do that.